Hi and welcome to the Tristan channel, and I wanted to do this video because it's really interesting subject to explore and it's really important to share this information. Now, unfortunately, despite the science, people still believe people who are transgender are mentally ill or deluded. This, however, is not the case. Due to neurobiology, the irony in this debate is that either way you go with this, it still proves in both directions, either way, that a trans person isn't deluded. Also proves that gender is a social construct. I'll explain. Now, so what we have found in neurobiology is that despite female brains structurally, being structurally the same, there are some slight but small biological differences, or markers as you could call it. In animals, these markers are larger and more noticeable, but in humans they are not as noticeable. E.g., you need to scan or dissect the brain to find these, whereas with animal brains they are more larger in proportion, so therefore more visible, basically. Got a bit of camera glitch going on. So say for example a male brain is represented by, say, 3 dots and women 2 dots. Again, in animals, these dots would be larger, more noticeable, but in humans, they are smaller. Probably, I don't know, like the size of a grain of rice. But apart from that, structurally, a male-female brain is the same. And what we found is in a majority of people who are trans, e.g., if you're trans woman, when their brains have been scanned, they've shown the markers indicating a female brain. Some dismiss this as a theory when indeed it is a fact. Some have used the argument that this is silly because there is no difference between a male and female brain. But that then also causes a problem because, ironically, if male and female brains are the same, then asking a man or a woman what defines a man or a woman can't be answered. Because if male and female brains are exactly the same, then there's nothing to prove or say that a trans woman is wrong or deluded, because it's all down to how they feel and how they define themselves. It also proves the further that gender is a construct, because if male and female brains are the same, the things that are then imposed upon their behaviours, etc., is therefore a social tool or a social cause, not a biological cause, due to the lack of difference. But again, this is because there is a major misunderstanding in the expression of men and women's brains being the same. Because, correct, they are the same, albeit due to birth or environmental circumstances, there are changes in that occur to the brain. Hopefully they don't flash up too much. The glitches. These changes can happen at birth, and also, interestingly, can happen due to environment. For example, in experiments on rodents, if you take a male rat, poor bugger, and castrate it it then lives the rest of its life as a female. What's also interesting, it does this without a thought. Obviously, it's more complicated for humans because of our level of self-awareness and our problem with overthinking stuff. So if it happened to us, we would be very confused or wouldn't know what to do, etc. We're too much for ourselves. Whereas animals, albeit rats, although rats are intelligent, then for animals you just get on with the basic needs of eating, sleeping, etc. Whereas humans live a more complex lifestyle. So saying that it's all just a theory and that it's nonsense because male or female brains are the same won't help you in any discussion or argument, because either direction you go in or go down, the evidence wins in favour of trans people. It's also a moot point. There is no way you can do it. It will be reduced down to sex, but then again that wouldn't work either because of differences in human behaviour. Not all women act alike or behave alike, and the same with men. So you can't reduce it just down to body parts. But let's just say if these markers didn't exist and male and female brains are the same, then there's nothing to say that they are wrong. There is no way of proving that they are deluded, because how can you define what it means to be a woman when both woman and male brains are the same? Do you see the problem? Or am I making it too complicated for you, confusing for you? Although unfortunately the problem is people won't see the problem with that. As I said, due to advancements in medical research, we have discovered that with transgender people, they are essentially people born in the wrong body. If you're a trans male, your brain, whether scanned or dissected, a neurobiologist will be able to identify if it's a male or a female brain. The other thing as well is you can't really say that sex defines gender, because you also have the problem of you can't have people who are born almost completely female but on the biological level register as male. Some of you making this not think this is nonsense, but it's a fact. The proof is literally walking and breathing on the planet as we speak. According to anthropology, gender is a construct. What defines a man and a woman is based on that culture's cultural roles within society. Sorry, trying to get my mouse dry. For just a rough example, in some cultures women play equal roles, but in some cultures women are still seen as secondary, or in some cultures it may be the men who have secondary. And these shifts in positions show major differences in social constructs and how they perceive men and women. So what you may define as a man or a woman isn't the same in any other culture. The irony is to find what a man or a woman is like defining what a table is. if you say a table, if you set like a table, if you say the table is something with 4 legs, then okay, then what about my kickstool? That has a flat surface and 4 legs. When does my kickstool stop being a kickstool and become a table? There are many ways to define both a chair and a table. What makes a table and what makes a chair, this is the same with what it means to be a man or a woman. So in general, gender is a social construct and a function of the culture or the cultures of those areas. It has nothing to do with sex. Therefore, sex and gender are separate. This is why they're separate. So there's no point even asking ourselves that question. There's 7.9 billion people on Earth with their own opinion. That's what, 7.9 billion opinions to consolidate? The Native Americans, Indians, were, who had no problem accepting transgender. Their attitude was, if you were a trans woman or two-spirited, then what they would do is they would get them to live and perform the duties of a woman in the camp. And if you identified as a male, you would then see and perform the functions of the men. They did this with no problem and without battering an eyelid, annoyed, and that's the same way you have to apply it to this. Again, cultures and history show that it's all a social construct, and to deny this is just ignorance. Don't get me wrong, people entitled to an opinion, but denying it and then saying that they have that this has been a fact is just being ignorant. Going back to the thing with the rats, the interesting thing as well is in the case of humans. If you look at history of eunuchs, even with their behaviour, it would change from male to female. She-fly behaviour, not because of the castration, but because of the roles they were given. They were either given jobs like maids to the queen or concubines to the king, or better, both. Some cultures did it this way because it was to keep the king faithful to the queen, because if she had female servants, he would be sleeping around with them and getting the duff, as it were. This wasn't always the case, as some chose to have this done. So in many ways, a lot of them, you could say, were basically the early form of transgender people in certain cultures, and also the first ever sex reassignment surgery. Some cultures it was also some cultures also listed it as a gender. So with any of this, like I said, because of cultural practices and structures, you cannot define what a man is and what a woman is. Ultimately, according to anthropology, it all comes down to the function you serve within society, not what genitalia you have. So going back to what I was saying earlier, let's just say, for example, that the male and female brain, for argument's sake, was literally 100% the same. Then you've lost the debate anyway. Because how can then a man or a woman define their own gender? They can only define themselves. There has to be in that case, environmental factors, wouldn't it? Because you're not programmed mentally to be a man or a woman inside the womb. That manly or womanly behaviour, you could say, is due to growing up in a family, etc. You would have nothing to make a comparison. It's going to be just way more complicated, you know? So, hence the beauty of childhood. They're blind to race, gender, etc., which is why they're good at making friends compared to grown-ups. They do so without judgment. And ironically, why they are able to understand certain concepts better than we do. Adults have a hard time processing what trans person is, or what a non-binary person is. But a child has no problem, because a child doesn't judge all these notions that confuse us, that are installed onto us by social norms. Whereas a child hasn't been programmed with social norms. Therefore, they can look at it from an outside perspective and understand it better, which is also why we should give children more credit when it comes to trans kids. Because in fact, unlike us, or some of us who may get confused on the issue, they can see it clearer. And people may preach their philosophy. Oh, I accept that I may be, they preach that philosophy of, oh, I may be wrong, but pride and human nature still dictates that just because they don't understand something, they therefore say, oh, it's nonsense, because they refuse to be wrong, even though they claim that they don't mind being wrong, or care about their opinion and their bigotry, or they care about their bigotry and opinion more than they do the facts. A minority of people got upset because the World Health Organization announced that gender dysphoria was no longer a mental illness or condition. This was due to the research and the facts it was presented with by the Endocrinology Institute. It even says this on small print on their site last time I checked, or during the time they announced it at least anyway. But bigots have argued that they did this to pander to the 1%, because medical journals said it was a mental illness. Well, hello, that's kind of slightly moronic statement and argument, because it hasn't been long announced. It will take time to update the books that are already there. In fact, some of them actually have since 2016. But also there are definitions in these journals that go back to 18 to 1900s, because the exact same books used to claim that Jews had different shaped heads. This was obviously anti-Semitic and wrong, so it was removed. Medical journals update and change with the science. So thinking a trans person is deluded based on an outdated opinion is just ignorant or willfully being bigoted. It's strange as well, because if people are not transphobic and they claim to truly support the trans community, or even if they have friends claim to support their friends, then you'd think they'd be overjoyed or happy for them with this news, because it's nice to know that when someone is confirmed not to be crazy. Why would you not want the best for them? It's really sad and seems a bit two-faced. The beauty of this data, though, is it can help us assess people in gender therapy to determine if they are really trans or someone who is of other mental issues. But the science says the majority of trans people aren't, however. Those who think otherwise will never change their minds, despite the facts. I could keep going on, but I wanted to do a video, not an audiobook, exploring the transgender brain. I use that term loosely. Yeah, it's the same as our brain. And just like sexuality, transsexuality exists in nature even more so than humans. And yes, even with mammals. And yes, you're entitled to deny the facts because you're entitled to your opinion. After all, lots of people still think the earth is flat despite the evidence. Still an opinion, not a fact. And with that, keep it to yourself. If your opinion doesn't benefit me or anyone else, then keep it to yourself. And despite the facts, you end up, though, presenting them to people suffering the Dunning-Kruger effect or even cognitive dissonance. And despite the facts, they will always insist on preaching or repeating out-of-date, inaccurate science, not just with bioneurology, but with biology in general. So with that, thanks for watching, take care, and be well.
Do you think that the transgender brain looks more like the gender they were assigned at birth or the gender that they identify with? Let's find out. In 2020, Swedish neuroscientists put 30 cis subjects and 30 trans subjects into brain scanners. They showed them an image of their own body and then versions that had been altered to appear more masculine or more feminine while recording brain activity. And here's what they found. When the cisgender group saw gender-affirming images, for example, a man seeing his body become more masculine, their brains lit up in all these different areas. And amazingly, the trans group showed almost the same exact brain activity, but it was when they saw their body morphed in the opposite direction, away from their gender assigned at birth. On the other hand, when the cis group saw their body shifted away from their sex assigned at birth, for example, men seeing these images of their body, their brains looked like this, much less activity. And the same thing was seen when the trans group saw their body morphed towards their sex assigned at birth. The takeaway here seems clear to me. The transgender brain behaves just like the gender it identifies with. And there's more evidence for this too. For example, another study shows that trans men who transitioned from female to male showed less brain response to breast stimulation than cis women. Now, we're not looking here at psychology or surveys. We're looking at biology, data taken directly from the brain, which seem to tell a pretty clear story. So take all this however you will, but I ask you to please take it in peace and in kindness. Thank you for your interest. Please follow for more neuroscience.